Think about the last time you faced a situation that tested your patience. Perhaps it was a remark that irritated you, an action that made you feel disrespected, or an unfair circumstance that made you want to react immediately. In that moment, what did you do? Did you react according to the first emotion that surfaced, or did you pause and choose a different response? The answer to that question says a lot about you. Not just about your personality, but about the degree to which you are in control of yourself. Stoicism teaches that we cannot control what happens to us, but we can always control how we react to it. And it is at this point that the difference is made between a weak mind that reacts instinctively and a stable mind that knows how to consciously respond. Training the mind to respond is not about suppressing emotions or pretending to be calm. It is the ability to recognize rising emotions, create a conscious pause, and choose an action consistent with your values, reason, and character, even when the world around you is chaotic. In this video, we will delve into the art of training the mind to respond instead of reacting, a core competence of the Stoic, but also an extremely necessary life skill in the modern world full of pressure and constant change. If you have ever regretted reacting too quickly or wished you could be calmer in difficult moments, this journey is for you.
Principle 1. Identify instinctive reaction.
Most people believe their enemy is circumstance, other people, or events outside their control. But in reality, what causes you to lose composure, say things you regret, and hurt yourself often doesn't come from the outside. It emerges from within, very familiar and almost automatic. That is the instinctive reaction. Reaction is an ancient survival mechanism programmed to protect you from danger. When feeling threatened, disrespected, or hurt, the reaction immediately kicks in. Defense, attack, justification, or flight. It is fast, but blind. It doesn't pause to ask if what you are about to say is necessary. It doesn't care about long-term consequences. It only wants immediate emotional release. Therefore, anger often flares up before you have time to think. Words often escape before you have time to choose. And when the moment passes, what remains is not relief, but a feeling of emptiness, regret, or self-reproach. Not because you are weak, but because you handed power over to an unconscious reflex. Marcus Aurelius once reminded himself, "People are not distressed by the events that happen, but by the first thought they attach to that event." That thought comes so quickly that before you have time to think, you have already acted. And we are accustomed to believing we are forced to obey it. But in the Stoic spirit, the first thought is not the final decision. It is merely the mind's reaction, not a command that you must follow. The first principle for training the mind is not to eliminate the reaction. That is impossible. Reaction is part of being human, but you don't have to follow it. You don't have to let it decide your words, actions, or the person you become in that moment. You only need to do one thing. Don't grant it power. And as soon as you realize this, you step out of the role of the controlled person and begin to stand in the position of the master of yourself.
Principle 2. The pause, where you reclaim choice. People often don't realize they are losing control, not because the emotions are too strong, but because the moment passes too quickly. We say things we never intended to say. We react in ways that just minutes later feel untrue to ourselves. And when everything settles, what remains is not relief, but the feeling, I could have chosen differently. The pause is where that changes. It is not about suppressing emotions, but about giving yourself an extra beat of awareness. Just slowing down long enough not to be led by the first thought and clearly enough to respond in a way that allows you to respect yourself later. Between what just happened and the action you are about to take, there always exists a very small gap.
Often it lasts only a few seconds, sometimes just a single breath. But it is that very gap that determines whether you are reacting instinctively or consciously responding. The Stoics do not try to react faster than life. They practice to slow down at the right moment, not to evade or hesitate, but to avoid being swept away by the first flow of thought that arises. When there is a pause, the mind has space to observe and reason has a chance to speak. Epictetus once reminded us that what is within our control is not the event, but our choice in the face of that event. But choice only exists when there is a pause. If you don't pause, you are not truly choosing. You are merely reflexing. The pause doesn't need to be long. Sometimes it is just a deep breath before replying, a second of silence before sending a message back, a moment to observe what is rising within you, anger, fear, or the need to prove something. As soon as you see it, the pull weakens. When you create the pause, you are no longer led by the first thought. You begin to ask different questions. Is this worth reacting to? Which response aligns with the person I want to be? It is at that moment that reason gets a chance to speak, not to suppress emotions, but to place them in their proper context. The clearer the pause, the more freedom you have. Not freedom from the circumstance, but freedom from being dragged along by reflex. And every time you choose to pause, even if only for a few seconds, you are training a new instinct. The instinct for conscious response. That is when true strength begins to emerge. Quiet, unostentatious, but firm enough so that you no longer lose yourself in the most important moments.
Principle 3. Separate from emotions.
When emotions arise, what causes people to lose control is not how strong the emotion is, but the fact that they let the emotion automatically dictate their actions. You get angry and immediately speak out. You get annoyed and immediately react. From that moment, the emotion is no longer a fleeting state. It becomes the pilot. Stoicism does not teach you to extinguish emotions, nor does it require you to stand still and endure them. It teaches you something simpler but much more powerful. Do not let emotions command your actions. You can be angry, but you don't have to act on that anger. You can be annoyed, but you are not obliged to react immediately. Detaching yourself from emotions does not mean denying them. It means recognizing that the emotion is present, but temporarily refraining from acting upon it. Instead of saying, "I am this anger," the Stoic sees more clearly. An anger is arising within me, and I do not need to act on it yet. That pause alone is enough to keep you from being swept away. Imagine emotion as a wave. It surges quickly, powerfully, and loudly. If you charge into it, you will be swept away. If you fight against it, you will lose energy. But if you do not add words, do not add impulsive actions, the wave will recede on its own. Not because you forced it, but because you did not fuel it. The Stoics understand that emotions are only powerful when they are nourished by reaction. When you don't speak immediately, don't act immediately, don't prove yourself immediately, the emotion begins to weaken. And while it weakens, you maintain the necessary clarity to avoid losing yourself. Observing emotions is not indifference, and certainly not resignation. It is keeping the power of choice for yourself. You give the emotion the right to exist, but not the right to command. You are the one seeing the anger, not the person controlled by the anger. And when you achieve that, an important boundary is established. Emotion is a guest, not the host. It can come, but it does not determine what you will say, what you will do, or who you will become. When you can observe the emotion without acting on it, you stand above it.
Principle 4.
Respond based on values, not the ego. Once you have created the pause and are no longer dragged away by emotion, an important question begins to emerge. It is not, "What am I feeling?" but, "How do I want to respond?" It is at this moment that you move away from instinctive reflex and step into the territory of conscious choice. Reaction always originates from the ego. It wants to prove itself, compete, and immediately protect its self-image. But the response is different. Response does not ask if you are offended, but asks, "Does this action align with the person I want to be?" When you change the question, the entire direction changes. The Stoics do not choose to act to win an argument. They choose to act to uphold their character. Wisdom, temperance, justice, courage, these are not abstract concepts, but the compass guiding the response. When you respond based on values, you don't need to say much. You don't need to explain. You simply need to act consistently with your inner standard. There are times when the right response is to speak up, but there are also times when the right response is silence, not out of fear, but because you realize that not every provocation is worthy of your energy. When you don't respond from the ego, you are no longer compelled to prove anything. Epictetus once reminded us that what makes people free is not controlling others, but not letting others control how they act. When you choose to respond based on values, you cut the invisible thread connecting your action to the behavior of others. You no longer live passively, being pulled along or provoked. Responding based on values brings an advantage that reaction can never achieve. You have no regrets. Regardless of the external outcome, you maintain respect for yourself. You do not compromise your character just to satisfy a temporary emotion. And that is a silent yet very stable form of power. When you respond from values, it is not the ego speaking, but the self that has been cultivated from within. You don't need to defeat anyone. You just need not to lose to yourself. Principle 5. Daily practice. Make response your new instinct. Conscious response does not appear simply because you understand it. Understanding is the start, but without practice, you will still react according to old habits whenever emotions are strong enough. The Stoics do not believe in sudden change. They believe that response is a skill, and every skill needs to be practiced daily, in real life. This practice does not happen when everything is calm, but emerges exactly when you are most likely to lose control. When you feel misunderstood, disrespected, or when the ego is triggered and urges you to react immediately. In those moments, you do not need to react immediately. Slow down a bit. Don't speak right away. Don't decide right away. That very small pause is your first training session, where you learn not to let emotion issue commands. But the practice doesn't stop in that moment. It continues when the day ends and you look back at how you reacted, not to self-blame, but to adjust for next time. At the end of the day, Stoics often take a few minutes to journal, not to judge, but to look squarely. In what moments today did I react hastily? And where did I do better than yesterday? Writing down those moments helps you clearly see how old patterns are repeating. And only when you see clearly can you change. After reflecting, they do not stop there. They visualize a better response for the same situation. If that happens again tomorrow, how will I respond? What will I say? Or choose to keep silent? This visualization is how you train the mind for a new reflex, replacing the old familiar one. And importantly, the Stoics accept that they are not perfect. There will be days when you still react, still speak too quickly, still let emotion lead the way. That doesn't make you a failure. It simply reminds you that this is a long-term process. Over time, you will notice a silent change. The pause appears faster. Emotions lose power quicker, and conscious response becomes more natural. That is when you are stable enough not to be swept away by emotions as before. Training the mind helps you become so firm that you can be silent when necessary and speak up when it is warranted. And when response becomes your new instinct, you will realize you are the master of how you reply to emotion. Life will not stop testing you. Others will still say things that irritate you. Circumstances will still, at times, be unfair. Situations that touch the ego will not disappear just because you understand the philosophy. But after this journey, one thing has changed. You are no longer compelled to react as before. You have clearly seen what instinctive reaction is. You have learned how to create a pause. You know how to detach yourself from the emotions and choose to respond based on values instead of the ego. And most importantly, you understand that response is not an innate gift. It is a skill that can be trained every day in the moments of ordinary life. True strength is not in how fast you react, but in whether you dare to slow down when necessary. Not to evade, but to choose. Not to be silent out of fear, but to speak up when it is warranted. That is a silent yet very hard to shake form of power. The Stoics do not avoid storms. They train to stand firm internally when the storm hits. They do not seek to control the outside world, but train how they respond to what happens. When you choose to respond instead of reacting, you do not just avoid saying things you regret. You are building a reliable person from within, one who is not triggered by every provocation, not swept away by every small change. A person with a clear internal compass who walks steadily amidst the chaos. Perhaps after this video, your life will remain the same. Unpleasant situations will still occur. People will still say things that make you think. But if starting today, you begin to pause before reacting, you have changed more than you realize. If this journey resonates with you, please leave a like so that these values can reach more people. And if you want to continue the journey of building a stable mind every day, subscribe to the Stoic Journey channel to join us. See you again on the next journey.